Rosh Hashiva, Rav Bloom. It's a somewhat ridiculous covet for me to be speaking tonight, sharing a microphone with two people who, as Winston Churchill might have said, have done so much for so many. And it's Rav Bloom, who everybody knows what he's done for Klal Yisrael, and my beloved Rosh Hashiva, Rav Schiller Shlita, who is not only a Rabbi of mine, a mentor, more than anything else, I see a role model for somebody who is given of himself absolute Mesiras Nefesh. Moser his Nefesh to a certain extent, Moser his Rebbitzon's Nefesh, she's Moser his Nefesh, a joint Mesiras Nefesh that I think that we could all learn from, that what it means to really care about Klal Yisrael from two such people. I heard from Rav Shimshon Pincus Zatzal. Shimshon Pincus said there was once a resident, finished his medical school, he took his first position in a hospital, and he went on, and of course they gave him one of the not choice jobs to do. He was put on the night shift, and the head doctor told him that he's going on the night shift, and on the night shift there's a skeleton staff. He's going to be basically on his own, and that there's a lot of work to do. And if at any point he feels that he's overwhelmed, he should pick up a phone and call. They'll send in reinforcements. So this guy goes on the night shift, and of course, as a resident, he wants to make a good showing for himself. So he tries to do everything on his own, injections, examinations, whatever it is that doctors do. And in the course of the evening, after doing everything running around, one elderly man died. So the family immediately sued him. They went to court. When they got to court, towards the end of the case, the judge says, "Do you have anything you'd like to say before I pass sentence?" So this resident said, "Yes, I don't understand what's going on here. I heard the prosecutor, and I know that you're going to throw the book at me, and I don't understand why. There I was all night long. I was Moser Nefesh. I was running around from patient to patient, and at the end of the day, now I'm going to get in trouble." So the judge started chuckling. He said to him, "Who told you to do everything on your own? You were told that if at any point you're overwhelmed, pick up a phone and call for reinforcements. You fool, who told you to do it on your own?" Rav Pincus Zatzal said that every human being is human nature. Whatever we're going through in life, we try to do it on our own. We like to fix it up, make it better, make it work. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, who told you to do it on your own? If you're stuck, pick up a sitter and call for help. All you have to do is, they've cut the rates. Long distance to Shemayim now is much cheaper. They've cut the rates. Call, pick up a sitter and call. A Jew, through history, we've naturally gravitated to the sitter, and I would say the ladies in the room more than even men. I've watched children daven. Girls don't need a minyan. Girls stand there with a sitter, and they hold it, and they daven. Sometimes they say everything. I remember my daughter at about 5 years old said everything on the page. She started davening. She said, "Kan lo omrim mizmor lesoda." You know, she just said, she just davened the whole thing. It's written and you daven it. You watch a couple little boys davening, to a boy davening. I kind of takes 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. You know, looks around him. Nobody's looking. If there's another boy next to him, it's kind of boom, 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 boom. And, you know, that's the davening. So we're lucky that we have a framework called minyan for men to attend. But it's natural. Jews naturally gravitate to the sitter. That's what Jews do. Jews go to the sitter. I was once, my wife is from Columbus, Ohio. It's not my fault. And Columbus does not have a big Jewish community. And I walked in Columbus. My brother-in-law was an accountant in a department store. I had to go in. They're not used to seeing Jews there. I had to go in and find my brother-in-law. And I walked into the department store. The young lady behind the counter, obviously not Jewish. And I said to her, I mean, very not Jewish, and we're talking about borderline rednecky over there. And I said to her, "Excuse me, do you know where Mr. Cohen is?" She goes, "He's in Minyan." I said, "Pardon me?" She says, "He's in Minyan." I said, where is this here in Minyan?" She says, "Well, you go into the storage area, second office on the right." She couldn't have said what I thought she said. I was sure she could not have said that. So I walk in, open the door, middle of the day, Columbus, Ohio. There are 10 Jews in a room davening mincha. She was given instruction, 10 Jews who work at the department store, Give an instruction. If anybody calls, anybody asks for anybody, you tell them that he's a minyan. I'm convinced she has no idea. She thinks minyan is an amusement park of some sort. It's a giant. Where will I be? I'll be in minyan. I'm sure she can't possibly know what minyan is. But in the middle of the day, a Jew goes, stops what he's doing, and a Jew goes and he gets involved in davening. So the Chazal say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mis'ave l'tfilasan shel tzadikim. God desires, so to speak, the Tefilah of the righteous. What does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu mis'ave l'tfilasan shel tzadikim. So one of the ideas here is, in the United States, they have something called the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs became very famous because of that they killed. I was interested in the Navy SEALs long ago. At a certain point, I thought of maybe joining them, but I ended up at Or Sameach. That wasn't on the film for some reason. And I had certain disqualifications. One of them is that I'm a coward, so I wasn't going to make it. And, the Navy SEALs, they go through a training. They have a training period. What they do is they start out with, let's say, 500 of the rugged, toughest Marines. These are the guys who are trying to become Navy SEALs. They'll take these guys, in the first week, they'll do something to them. I'm making up the example, but it's not far from the truth. If anything, it's an underestimate. They'll take them the first week, and they'll have what's called sleep deprivation week. They go no more than 45 minutes sleep a night for an entire week. I know some of the ladies are thinking, well, big deal. I do that with my kids all the time, big deal. Okay, but they would go 45 minutes a night. By the middle of the week, 250 of the guys are going crazy. They drop out. They drop out of the program. They put them in a room, a nice warm room, have a meal, a bed, they go to sleep. Those who successfully pass the first week, they go on to the second week, which is submersion in ice water on and off for about 10 hours a day. And towards the middle of the week, another 150 guys drop out. Put them in a warm room, hot shower, bread, food, a bed. They're out of the program. 100 guys are left. They go to the last week, which is being dangled upside down by one leg for about 10 hours a day, on and off. By the end of the week, another 80 have dropped out. 20 complete the program. 20 become the Navy SEALs. Somebody looking in from the outside would look at this and say, I don't understand what's going on. Does that make any sense at all? You have over here 250 guys dropped out of the program the first week, sleep deprivation. Then you have 250 who succeeded. We succeeded. We passed the program. Good. Your reward is submersion in ice water. And if you pass that, we dangle you upside down. Doesn't seem to make any sense. And the answer is that there are many areas of life. A person who goes to medical school works harder than a person who's going to become an accountant. And a person who's going to become an accountant works harder than somebody who's going to major in physical education. That's the way it is. If you want to get to a certain level, the challenge often increases. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mis'ave l'tfilasan shel tzadikim means HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a person a privilege under certain circumstances and says, you have earned the right to draw even closer to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the source of all good, you've earned the privilege, you passed the first stage, I'm going to give you a challenge that's going to make you daven, it's going to bring out your tefillah, and that tefillah will give you the opportunity to get even closer. That's what happened to the avos and the imahos, and that is often the view. When we look at tefillah, what is tefillah for? One aspect of tefillah is hiskarvus to the Borei Olam. We get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the tefillah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes chooses to allow us to get closer, and a person eventually gets closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Makar HaTov. There was a complaint in the Panovich Yeshiva many years ago. Rav Shach Zatzal was approached by one of the staff members from the kitchen. The boys were breaking into the kitchen on Friday night to get to the cholent. Could you believe it? And Rav Shach called in the boys, and he said, listen, I don't want you to break into the kitchen. If you're hungry on Lil Shabbos, come to my house. I'll feed you. I'll give you whatever you want in my house. But I don't want you to break into the kitchen. Do you know why? Because when you break into the kitchen, it's gzela. And a Jew like Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to nurse from the non-Jewish women because his mouth of Kedusha spoke directly to the Shekhinah. I can't have you eating gzela because every time you daven, you are talking to the Shekhinah. A Jew talks to the Shekhinah. You cannot put gzela in your mouth. We have to understand that every time we daven, we're addressing the Shekhinah directly. We had one of the, on the screen it said there were 20,000 alumni of Or Sameach. That, in my opinion, is a gross under-exaggeration. I don't think the number could be counted, and certainly not the Talmidim. One of the multitudes who came through the yeshiva was a Ger Tzedek from Italy. And finding his way to Judaism, the natural place, the only place where he could come, get educated from the bottom up, came to Or Sameach. He told me that when he was in the process, when he was searching for truth, he once came across a siddur in Italian, translated into Italian. Came across a siddur. He opened up the siddur to Modeh Ani and he started crying. He said to me, a Jew wakes up in the morning and the first thing he does is he addresses the Shekhinah. Because I cannot believe it. I was overwhelmed by it. So he started crying when he realized what it is, what Tefilah is to us. So there's a koach of Tefilah. We don't want to just get close. We know that there's a koach of Tefilah, and Tefilah could bring about very concrete and tangible results. We have to be a little honest here. Honesty is a challenge, especially this time of year, around Erev Yom Kippur, when we klap al chet, and we have to confront ourselves. Confronting others is never a problem. Confronting ourselves is a little bit more of a challenge. And, years ago I went to England, and I got to customs. Now, when you get on the plane, they give you a card to fill out, a landing card. They usually give it to you as soon as you sit down to make you think you're almost there. You haven't even taken off yet. And I've got to fill out this landing card. Now, because I'm a Kohen, I had a problem because I was hesitant about flying back from England. There was a question about Kohanim flying on planes. So I routed myself from England to fly to West Germany, to Frankfurt. And from Frankfurt, I would not have any issue with El Al. They don't bring bodies from there. So I wouldn't have a problem. So I was routed. My ticket took me to England. I was there for about a week, and then I was going to come back through Frankfurt. And they gave me this landing card. And on the landing card, it says you have to fill in your occupation, which is a challenge for many people. I had to fill in my occupation. What do I do, right? So I decided, well, I guess I'll write teacher. I don't know if rabbi is an occupation. Rabbi may be a title. I'm not sure what it is. But I'm a teacher, I think. So I wrote in, I'm a teacher. I get to the border control, and there was a massive, about a 6'4" Hindu with a long beard and a tichel. It was quite a contrast. And as soon as I got to the what do you call it? As soon as I got there, there was an immediate and tangible animosity between us. For some reason, he didn't like me. I could tell right off the bat he didn't like me. Perhaps it is the epic meeting of the God believer versus the cow worshiper. I'm not sure. He may have had an inferiority complex. And as I got to the counter, say to this, the guy comes over and he takes a look at my card and he says to me, what do you teach? And I can tell, very aggressive. He says to me, what do you teach? So I said, Torah. So he flinched for a second because he didn't know what Torah was. I said, Torah. So he looks at my ticket. He says, why are you traveling through Germany? A haven for terrorists. So I said to him, and I didn't like his attitude at all. I said, why are you traveling through Germany? So I said to him, well, because I'm a Kohen, and there's a problem with Mesim on the plane. Now, there are some poskim Armekil, and there's a problem with the Posach Tefach, but there are some Armekil, I'm Machmir, and therefore I'm going through Germany. He is 6'4". He's looking down at me with his beard, and it was one of the most delicious 5 seconds of my life. Because he was looking at me with these very stern eyes. I'm just looking at him like this. Right? And I could see the battle because he didn't know a word I was talking about. He knew that I knew that he didn't know what he was that I knew that he didn't know what I was talking about. And we both knew it. And it was only a question, will you be Modeh al ha'emes? And he looked at me again, and I could see the internal battle in his eyes. It was clear. He was having this battle, and eventually he looks at me and goes, what do you teach? I said, Torah. And he stamps my passport, me, who he suspects of being a terrorist, and he lets me through. He could not be Modeh al ha'emes. To admit the truth is a challenge in life. Where are we really holding? Where are we holding Bein Adam L'Chavero? As the Rosh Hashiva mentioned, Bein Adam L'Makom. Where are we really genuinely holding in life? One of those areas is Tefilah. There's a koach of Tefilah, and we often pay lip service. We say, yes, I believe that there's a koach of Tefilah. Tefilah could bring about results, concrete, tangible results. do we really believe it, and to what extent? And to the degree that we believe in the potency is often the degree that the tefillah will have that very potency. I once went to Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita, had a problem, wanted to get a bracha. So Rav Chaim gave me a bracha, and I said to him in Hebrew, Harav, yesh mashu prakti shani yachol lasot? Is there something practical I could do? So he looked up at me and said, Titpalel. It's as practical as it gets. Straight to the point, it's as practical as it gets. Sometimes in life people say, well, the doctors will say there's nothing more we could do. All we could do is daven. That's not our attitude. Our attitude is it starts, continues, and is completed with tefillah. Then we try to put in our ishtadlus and hopefully not mess things up too badly. But the goal, the job is the tefillah. It begins with tefillah. It's practical. It's real to us. It's not something that, okay, yeah, there's this thing I learned about in school called tefillah. It's something that we do and we genuinely believe. They had, in Eretz Yisrael, they had years ago a drought, one of many. And so there was a Yom Tefillah. And the Charedim, the B'nai Torah gathered. There's a massive Tefilah session at the Kaisel. Thousands of people gathered to daven. Short time after the davening, it started raining. It started pouring. The Ayalon Highway in Tel Aviv was flooded. Cars were flooded, the Ayalon Highway. There were two not as yet religious Jews in Tel Aviv who were standing on the bridge overlooking the flooded Ayalon Highway. And out of sheer frustration, one of them said to the other one, Ha-charedim ve'atfilot shelahem. Our fault, we davened. I want to tell you something. If we'd believe it as much as they did, we wouldn't have had the drought to begin with. Ha-charedim ve'atfilot shelahem. That's exactly what we're meant to believe. Ha-charedim ve'atfilot shelahem. Heard a little girl, two little girls were having a discussion. They were in a home, and one of the topics in the home, one of the things that came up was the subject of shidduchim. They heard their parents talking about their older siblings. Finally, the 8-year-old asked the 10-year-old, "Maze shidduchim? What are shidduchim?" He said, "Maze shidduchim? Shidduchim is you daven to Hashem and then you get married. That's what shidduchim are." What is so pasha to a 10-year-old girl? What's so pasha to a 10-year-old girl? And sometimes we grapple with it. That's what we believe the koach of tefillah is. The koach of tefillah is practical, something, it's the greatest weapon that we have. Chazal talk about Yaakov Avinu holding a double-edged sword in his hand and a bow and arrow in his hand. That's the tefillah of a Yaakov Avinu. It's practical, and it accomplishes, and we have to put our heart into it. Had a young man at Or Sameach who told me out of frustration, he said to me, every time he davens, the opposite happens. So I said to him, okay, I got something for you to daven for. Just let me know. I want you to daven that the stock market's going down tomorrow. That's first of all. Just let me know what time you daven. Then I said to him, no, it doesn't. You're so confident. He was so confident. He was absolutely sure, by the way. I said, if we would believe in the koach of our tefillah doing what it's supposed to do, the way he believed that does the opposite, our tefillah would look a whole lot different. That's what we're meant to believe in the koach of tefillah. So the obvious question that we always ask is, okay, I've davened until I'm blue, my lips are turning blue. Why am I not receiving that which I've asked for? Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu withholding that which I'm davening for? Any area of life, banei chaye umezoneh, why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu withholding it? So I'll tell you a story that somebody told me years ago. Very powerful story. Said to me, there was a man who had 3 sons. On the day his oldest son turned 18, a letter arrives in the mail from a lawyer. An anonymous donor has sent $1 million to become your son's on his 18th birthday. What a simcha. Family, son's 18, he's a millionaire. 18-year-old male takes the money, and of course he goes out first thing, buys himself a sports car. What else could it be? By young ladies, sometimes it's different. It could be either a car, a wardrobe, an 8-slice toaster. The answer is not always universal. But by men, it's always a young man, 18 years old, it's always going to be a car. Goes out, buys himself a sports car. All right? He's driving around in his new sports car for about 3 weeks, and at a certain point hits a tree at 90 miles an hour and he dies instantly. 2 years later, the second son turns 18. Day he turns 18, an anonymous donor, letter from the lawyer, anonymous donor sent $1 million to become your son the day he turns 18. This time the family is more cautious. They put most of the money away. But he's still got more money than is good for him as an 18-year-old. Takes the money, gets involved with the wrong friends, gets involved with drugs. He becomes addicted, has to be institutionalized. His life is ruined. 2 years later, the third son turns 18. Again, $1 million from the lawyer, an anonymous donor. Father picks up the phone, he calls the lawyer, he says, we don't want the money. The lawyer says, I'm sorry, your son is already 18, you cannot turn down the money for him. The father goes ballistic, he says, who keeps sending this money to my son? The lawyer says, you remember about 20 years ago, you had a partner in business and the two of you had a very nasty split. He vowed one day he's going to get revenge and decided the best way he could get revenge is to send $1 million to each of your sons on his 18th birthday. Looks like he was right. So sometimes we ask the Ribono Shalom, please Ribono Shalom, I have a whole list of things that I need. And the Ribono Shalom may look at us and say, you know what? If I give that to you, you will crash it either physically or spiritually. It's not good for you right now. We don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides. We only live with the faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. But sometimes we ask, why am I davening so much, so long, so powerfully, and I'm not being given that which I want? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know why? It's not good for you right now. In my plan, it's not good for you. That's one of the possible reasons. There's another possible reason. I think that it's a very important reason for us tonight, especially as we go into Yom Kippur. Chafetz Chaim says that the purity of our mouths affects our tefillah. The purity of our mouth, what comes out of our mouth. And in the world that we live in, there was a Yeshiva mentioned about people talking to themselves. Walking around now, half the time somebody's talking, and you start answering, and you realize they didn't even see you. They're talking to themselves. I was in a cab here in Israel. Cab driver has the radio on, and the guy says on the radio, there are over 2 billion cell phone users in the world. So the cab driver says more to himself than to me. He says, Ken betach lemi en. Who doesn't have a cell phone? So I turned to him and I said, li en. I don't have a cell phone. He looked at me, which was problematic because he's meant to be driving forward. He looks at me and he goes, lama lo. He was shocked. Had I released an alligator in the cab at that point, they would not have been anywhere near as shocked as hearing that I didn't have a cell phone. So he said to me, lama lo. So I said, what do I need one for? So that I could be out on the street and then I'll get a call from my wife, Tavi od shte kilot agvaniot abaita. He says to me, Ata tzodek, ata mamash tzodek, nachon, 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 bidyuk. So I tried to placate him. I said, look, you need it. You have a clientele. It's not good for you. You obviously have to have the phone. On the other hand, that phone is created hefkeris with our mouths. Our mouths we're so used to running our mouths now that the mouths, anything we think of comes out of our mouth. So if a woman is walking, true story, she saw a young lady on the street, and woman is expecting, she has her 3-year-old child next to her who has some sort of physical challenge. And the mother is walking and she's about 7 months pregnant. And this lady looks at her, she sees her with her child, and she says to this lady, aren't you worried the next one's going to be like him? Can you imagine such a thing? Somebody let her out of her cage for the day, and that's what she said. And she wants her tefillah to be heard. Then she's going to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be sensitive and have rachamim. She wants her tefillah to be heard. The mouths run. I had a guy at the yeshiva, one of the yeshivas, a yeshiva. I was at the coffee machine, and I needed change for 10 shekels. So I asked the guy, could I have change? Thank you. He gives me the change. I get a coffee. I said, thank you very much. He looks at me and goes, no problem, dog. And he turns around and he walks off into the sunset. Now, I want you to know, I was not even remotely insulted. To the contrary, I was flattered. That is the ultimate compliment, the ultimate epithet for somebody who lives in the ghetto is to be called a dog. That is a way of saying friend, by the way. Your dog means that you're a good friend. That you could be a friend and you could be a dog. So there's nothing like having a cup of coffee in the morning being called dog. Now, I was amused. I was actually amused. I lapped up my coffee, and I was actually amused. What was really amusing was the fact that he walked off. He never even broke stride. He never thought to turn and say, oh, Rebbe, sorry, I guess I shouldn't have called you dog. Ask Rav Bloom, what would have happened when he was in yeshiva? Need I finish the sentence? A havamina in our days to refer to a Rebbe, and I didn't even blame him. He didn't even know he did anything wrong because the mouth is hefker. The mouth is hefker. Chafetz Chaim says, Lashon Hara. Onas dvarim, whatever a person uses his mouth for. If the mouth is not used properly, we're contaminating the kli that we're using to approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That affects the potency of our tefillah. That affects the results of the tefillah. The kli is contaminated. If you use your mouth positively, if a person uses his mouth the right way, so then it gives a koach to the tefillah. Person who uses his mouth and the mouth is clean, and the mouth is positive, and the mouth is used to make people feel good, and the mouth is builds people up. That's a mouth that a person can then approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu with. One young man walked into yeshiva, and he was struggling with his Yiddishkeit, what they call off the derech, kids at risk. Nowadays, I remember one of the mentors who came to Or Sameach, he mentioned to the Rosh Yeshiva, kids at risk? We're adults at risk. We always blame the kids. What about the adults? And this was what's called a kid at risk. So he came in, Rabbi asked him about his background. Kid said, well, I don't put on tefillin, I don't daven, I don't keep Shabbos. A few weeks ago, I tried keeping Shabbos. I didn't smoke. I didn't smoke on Shabbos. I went for about 5-6 hours. After 5-6 hours, I said, forget it. This is too hard. I started smoking. So the Rebbe said to him, I want to tell you something. I want to make you a deal. You know as well as I do, you've had a background. You know as well as I do that for breaking Shabbos, you're accountable. For breaking Shabbos, there are consequences. I want to make you a deal. I will gladly take any sort of punishment that you're going to get for Shabbos desecration on condition that you give me the reward that you're going to get for those 6 hours that you did not smoke on Shabbos. Because during the time you weren't smoking, the Malachi Asharis were dancing in Shemayim, and they said, look at that Ruvain not smoking. Look at that Ruvain keeping Shabbos. I'll gladly take the punishment if you're willing to give me the schar. Today the boy is Shomer Shabbos. A mouth is used positively. That's a person who could approach the Ribono Shalom and use his mouth in tefillah. That's a person whose kli is useful. His kli is potent. He's got a kli that's clean. He's got a kli that's efficient. That's the koach of the mouth when it comes to tefillah. We have a member of our staff at Or Sameach who told me that he himself, when he came up through the ranks at Or Sameach, so he and his wife became frum, and he went to live in the United States in a community that was more or less established community. He was worried, he was concerned because as Bali Tshuva, maybe they're not going to find a shul they could daven in, and how are you going to fit in and how are you going to get established. So he was very, very concerned. His first Shabbos, he went to one of the established shuls. They had a kiddush afterwards. After the kiddush, guy comes over to him. Right after the kiddush, he's standing there with the kugel and the chont. The guy comes over and says, Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? The guy's very happy. Wow, somebody noticed me. Says, what's your name? Where are you from? Starts talking to him. Finishes with the first guy. A second guy comes over. Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? He said no less than 15 people came over to him and said Shalom Aleichem. He said that was such a welcome to the community. What he didn't know was the week before, the Rav had spoken to the Kehillah about how important it is to greet strangers when they come into the shul. He was the first lucky one, the winner, who came in after the Rav had given that speech. And the only way he found out was because the 16th guy came over to him, the shul kvetch, and he came over to me, stuck out his head and said, the Rav said we have to greet strangers. He told me he was so happy at the time that it didn't bother him whatsoever. He was thrilled that people came over to him. Do you understand what it takes to say hello to somebody, an encouraging word? Shalom Aleichem doesn't cost anything. And then a person davens. There's a tremendous potency in that tefillah. Sometimes in life, I think we get to situations where a person views the situation looks helpless, situation looks hopeless. And person doesn't know, where am I going to turn? What am I going to do? So, person has to know, Rav Chatzkel Levenstein Zatzal said, Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Torah learning, nothing matches Talmud Torah. Yet be'es tzara, when a person has a struggle, there's a special koach of Tefilah. A person has a struggle, there's a special koach in their Tefilah, where that Tefilah could take them. Because at an eitz tzara, the Tefilah is mesugal to do things and accomplish things that nothing else can, to pierce through and break through any of the barriers. There's a couple that made a trip on an Erev Pesach. A couple was making a trip. Took the whole family. They got to the airport, a couple in England. They got to the airport, and when they got to the airport with their 7 children, they found out that 12-year-old Shmuli's passport had expired. Don't let that happen. 12-year-old Shmuli's passport had expired. Now they're standing there. The wife has not cleaned the house, hasn't cooked, hasn't shopped, hasn't done anything for Pesach. They don't know what to do. The husband goes running around trying to talk to this official, that official. The wife is standing there. She's already crying. And she picks up her phone. She called her friend Miriam. Miriam, we're stuck at the airport. You're not going. She just has to let it out to somebody. Okay, Miriam hears. She hangs up. Her husband's back. We now got to look at this paper, that paper, the other paper. And nope, nothing going. Shmuley can't go. They can't leave him behind. They couldn't even sell him with the chametz. Now they're stuck. They got him. What do you do with the 12-year-old? The whole family she doesn't know what to do. And she's crying. Her husband feels horrible. How could we not have let her? So on and so forth. All of a sudden, her cell phone rings. It's her friend Miriam. Bela, where's the key to your house? She says, why? What do you want the key? She says, where's the key to your house? She says, by my next door neighbor, Pnina. She says, okay, thanks. She says, why? Why do you want the key to your house? She said, because there are 6 yeshiva bachrim on your doorstep right now waiting to go into your house and clean it up. I've already called the supermarket and made a Pesach order for you. And the neighbors, everybody is cooking something to be able to make a Seder at home. Sometimes a person, what could be more hopeless than a woman at the airport who is not prepared for Pesach? The only thing more hopeless is her husband. He is in trouble. A woman at the airport hasn't cooked. Could you imagine such a thing? Where's the Yeshua going to come? One phone call, the Yeshua is there. There are times in life where a person looks like the situation, there's no way to get through. All it takes is sometimes, Rav Chatzkel says, a person davens, reaches back, draws on a koach of Tefilah, and that koach could break through walls. That koach could break through all the barriers blocking the Tefilah. I think that all of us imagine the following. Imagine a person who decides he wants to make his living room bigger. Somebody decides he's going to make his living room bigger. Wants to make the living room bigger, got to move the walls. So the guy goes to one of the walls of the living room, and he starts pushing on the wall. He's pushing on the wall. His neighbor happens to come in and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm trying to move. I'm trying to expand my living room. I'm making the walls. I want to move the walls. He says, well, you can't move the walls by pushing on them. He says, yeah, but it can't hurt. All right? Sometimes people say, can't hurt. Doesn't help, it can't hurt. Sometimes people do things out of desperation. Can't hurt. What can it hurt? So you push. Can't hurt. The Chazon Ish said that in his town of Kosovo, there was a man, an eccentric Jew, who used to walk around with glasses frames but no lenses. So somebody said to him, Herschel, that doesn't help. He said, yeah, but it can't hurt. So we look at that and we laugh. But don't you understand we're that Herschel? Don't you understand that there are situations in life where we take desperation measures, we try moving the walls of our life by pushing on it in a way that's not really going to help. And what we really need to do is we need to reach out, we need to daven. There's a Rav traveling, he went to France. Such a beautiful story. A Rav went to France, and he walked into a shul, and he sees a Jew davening in this shul. And this Jew is shaking during his davening. Sometimes people daven quietly, they stand. This Jew was all over the place. And the Rav couldn't get his eyes off him. And after davening, he says to the Jew, could I ask you a question? I couldn't help noticing your exercise, your davening. I was very inspired. Could I ask you, why is it that you were jumping around so much? You were moving around so much. You were shaking your arms. He says, I'll tell you, Rabbi, I'm a very simple Jew. I don't know very much. I only remember when I was a little boy, my mother once called me into the kitchen. She said, Yankee, I want to show you something, and I want to make sure you never forget it. She filled a jug with water, and she put it on the kitchen table. And she shook the kitchen table, and the water spilled over. She said, Yankee, that jug is the Ribono Shel Olam. He's a kel mole rachamim. And all we have to do is figure out how to get some of that rachamim to spill over. He's a kel mole rachamim. Said, Rabbi, I don't know about my concentration, so I figured I'll shake the jug, shake out some rachamim by moving around aggressively. But he's absolutely right. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a kel mole rachamim. And all we have to do is figure out how to shake it a little bit to get some of that rachamim to spill over. Finally, we all have walls in our life. Every one of us has walls in our life that we know that we would like to move, and we know that we're helpless to move them on our own. In Tehillim it says, V'anochi tolas v'lo ish. David HaMelech says, V'anochi tolas v'lo ish. You know, certain animals are very complementary. And David HaMelech says, V'anochi tolas v'lo ish. The Medrash says, Klal Yisrael is compared to a worm. So, if we would be compared to a lion is already, sounds aggressive, brave, accomplishes. Some animals are a worm is not very complimentary. So if they say, we're a llama. Okay, that means we're relaxed, we sleep well after the cholent. That's a llama. A lion, certainly. A worm, that's what Klal Yisrael is. Says the Medrash, Ma tolazu ein la ela peh. A worm only has a mouth. Kach Yisrael ein lahem ela pihem. All we have is our mouths. You know what that means? One of the most powerful ideas and a potentially life-changing approach to Tefilah. A worm has a mouth. Take a big oak tree, and the oak tree rots, and eventually the oak tree falls. What does rotting mean? It means there are a bunch of little worms that are all eating out of the oak tree, and eventually the oak tree falls. Any one individual worm, if you would watch, could you tell that he took a chunk out of the tree? Any individual worm, you would never see a bite missing. They're biting at the tree and you wouldn't see anything. Yet there's obviously an effect because the tree eventually rots. That means the effect might be micro. But there's an effect every time one of those worms opens his mouth. The Medrash is saying every time we daven, there's an effect. Every tefillah of Klal Yisrael, we have our mouth, and not only that, there's no such thing as a wasted tefillah. Every single time we open our mouth, there's an effect, and the tefillah has a potency. The evening is dedicated to Refuah Shlema, for Reb Chaim Rotman. Over 30 years ago, when I was in Koilel, I remember Reb Chaim came across the street. He was in Or Sameach at the time. I was learning in a kollel across the street. I remember one day, we knew each other from being around the yeshiva. I remember one day he walked into the kollel. And we started shmuzing. I was asking about his learning program. And at a certain point he said to me, he's now learning Daf Yomi. I said to him, why are you learning Daf Yomi? It was a little strange for a bacher in the yeshiva. I said to him, why are you learning Daf Yomi? He said to me, Im lo achshav imosai. If not now, when? Right now, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's before Yom Kippur. We say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that this evening is in the schus of Reb Chaim, Im lo achshav imosai, for him, and for all of us in Klal Yisrael. Every single one of us who has a need, Banei, Chaye, Mezone, that covers the gamut. Every single one of us has walls in our home, in our lives, that we need to move. We say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the tzaras at Klal Yisrael, the tzaras internal, external, around the world. Say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shalom, Im lo achshav imosai. Please have rachamim on us. Kel mole rachamim. Spill over some of that rachamim. And we should all be zoche to a year of good health, a year of happiness, a year of nachas, and a gemar chasima tova. Amen.